My son, that is exactly what I am telling you. Stop sending money to her directly. Because girls like that don't know how to control themselves when money starts entering their hands. Today it is clothes, tomorrow it. Next thing, she will start looking too fine, too attractive, and other men will begin to gather around her. Before you come back from America, somebody else will carry her from your hand.
Clara's fingers tightened around the tray she was holding. Her heart began to pound so hard she could hear it in her ears. On the other end of the call, Adrian sighed. Clara knew that sigh too well. For 13 years, she had known it. It was the sigh he gave when he was tired, confused, or ready to agree just to avoid stress. Then his voice came through, tired and careless in the worst possible way. So, what are you saying I should do? Naomi answered immediately, like she had been waiting for that exact question. Send the money to me. I am the one she is living under. I will monitor everything. I will know what she needs and what she does not need. That way, she will stay decent. She will stay where you kept her. She will not start feeling like a big woman because of small dollars. Clara felt like the ground had opened under her feet. She looked down at her worn clothes. The sandals she had managed to stitch twice. The dry hands nobody noticed. The face that had grown thinner from stress. Small dollars? She had been stretching every single amount as if money could cry from being squeezed too hard. Adrian was silent for a moment. Then he said the words that cut deeper than anything Naomi had ever said to her face. Okay, Mama, that makes sense. I'll send it to you from now on. Naomi smiled. Clara did not need to see it to know. She could hear it in her voice. That is my son. Leave her matter for me. The call ended. Clara should have walked away, but her legs refused to move. She stood there behind the half-open kitchen door, breathing too slowly, feeling too much. Naomi tucked the phone into her wrapper, and then, with no one supposed to be watching, a slow, wicked smile touched her lips. Good, she whispered. Now let me see how you will enjoy my son's money. You, this low-class girl, do you think because you suffered with him when he had nothing, you are the one that will enjoy him now? The tray slipped from Clara's hand. Plates shattered across the floor. Naomi spun around. Their eyes met. And in that one terrible moment, Clara understood something she had been too loyal, too hopeful, and too patient to accept before now. Adrian's mother had never intended to help her. She had intended to control her, starve her slowly, and push her aside when the time came. But that was not even the worst part. Because before that night ended, Clara would hear another secret that would break whatever hope was left in her heart. And before the next week was over, she would make a desperate choice that would drag every person in that house toward disaster. Before we continue, tell me in the comments where you are watching from. And stay with this story, because what began as sacrifice would soon turn into betrayal, silence, and a truth no one was ready for. The truth was that Clara had loved Adrian before success ever knew his name. 13 years earlier, when life was still hard and tomorrow had no shape, Adrian was just a struggling young man with more dreams than results. He was not polished. He was not rich. He was not the kind of man people pointed at and said, that one will go far. He had one pair of decent shoes, two shirts he rotated carefully, and a quiet shame that sat on his shoulders whenever money was mentioned. But Clara saw something in him that other people missed. She saw hunger. Not hunger for food alone, though there were days that mattered too. She saw hunger for change, for dignity, for a different future. While other girls laughed at him, Clara stayed. When he could not pay for something important, she found a way to help. When he wanted to give up, she was the one who sat with him and reminded him that hard seasons do not last forever. She sold small things without announcing it. She gave up comfort without demanding praise. She did not love him loudly. She loved him with action. That was the difference. It was not the kind of love that only smiles when things are easy. It was the kind that carries weight in silence. Adrian's parents liked her in those days. Naomi called her my daughter. Victor told people she was respectful and calm. Clara was welcome in their house. She cooked, cleaned, helped, and moved around with the freedom of someone who was already being seen as family. When visitors came, Naomi would speak kindly of her. Clara's simple dressing was called decent. Her quiet nature was called good home training. Her loyalty was called a blessing. Everything about her looked admirable when Adrian had nothing. Then, opportunity came. Adrian got the chance to travel to America for study and work. The whole family celebrated as if heaven had finally opened one eye in their direction. Naomi cried. Victor praised God. Adrian walked around with fear and hope mixed together. Because even though the door had opened, he still needed money to step through it. A lot of money. And money was the one thing none of them had enough of. Clara became part of the miracle without anybody fully knowing how much she gave up. She sold what she could. She released things she had been saving. She denied herself small comforts. She put her own plans on hold. She contributed quietly, piece by piece, until her sacrifice became part of the road Adrian used to leave the country. When he found out how much she had given, he stared at her with tears in his eyes. Why would you do this? He asked. Clara smiled through her own pain and told him the truth. Because if one day you become great and I did not help you when you were falling, then my love would mean nothing. Adrian held her tightly that day and promised, I will never forget. The day Adrian left for America, Clara stood by the gate and watched the car disappear until there was nothing left to see. Naomi cried openly. Victor wiped his eyes. Clara held her tears until night came. Then she sat on the floor in her small room and pressed both hands over her mouth so no one would hear her break. She was not crying because Adrian had left. She was crying because she had stayed behind with nothing but trust, and trust can feel very lonely when it is all a woman owns. At first, Adrian tried. He called often. He sent messages. He sounded tired sometimes, rushed at other times, but the warmth was still there. He told Clara to stay in his parents' house because they were getting older. He also told her to remain there because, deep down, he believed that was how to protect their relationship. In his mind, she would be safe under his family's roof. In his mind, proximity to his parents meant security. He did not know that control can wear the same face as care until it is too late. Adrian began sending Clara money directly at first, not enough to make her rich, but enough to help her live with some dignity. Enough to handle small needs, school forms, toiletries, transport, and food. Clara used that support wisely. She returned to school. She continued growing quietly. She never became flashy. She never became reckless. She never used the money to chase attention. She stretched it carefully and used it to survive, to study, and to hold on to the life she believed she and Adrian were still building together from a distance. But slowly, something changed inside the house. The more Adrian's life improved abroad, the more Naomi's attitude toward Clara began to shift. It was not sudden at first. It came in comments, in looks, in little questions filled with hidden contempt. If Clara wore a neat dress, Naomi would ask who she was trying to impress. If she braided her hair nicely, Naomi would say she was beginning to look too proud. If she came home happy from school, Naomi would remind her that books do not make a wife. Clara tried to ignore it. She told herself it was stress, misunderstanding, or old age. She told herself patience would win. She told herself love would eventually clear everything up. But Naomi's heart was already changing. The same girl who looked good enough when Adrian was poor now began to look too ordinary for the future Naomi had started imagining. Adrian was becoming successful. He was living abroad. He was sending real money. Suddenly, Clara no longer looked like a loyal woman who suffered with him. She looked, in Naomi's eyes, like a reminder of struggle, like somebody too simple to match the image she wanted for her son now. And that was when cruelty became more open. Clara was still the one doing housework, still the one helping with chores, still the one trying to attend school in peace. But Naomi began to speak to her with a sharpness that stripped dignity from simple moments. If Clara needed anything, she had to ask in a way that made her feel like a beggar. If she sat too long to read, Naomi accused her of pride. If she looked tired, Naomi acted as if suffering was something Clara had personally chosen to annoy her with. Victor saw some of it, but he was the kind of man who hated conflict more than he hated injustice. So he would complain softly and then return to silence. Then came the day Clara overheard the phone call. After that, everything changed. Adrian no longer sent the money to her directly. Naomi became the gatekeeper. Naomi controlled what Clara received, when she received it, and how she received it. What had once been support became humiliation. If Clara needed soap, she had to ask. If she needed money for transport, she had to explain herself. If she needed something private and urgent as a woman, Naomi would first sigh, insult, or delay. Adrian thought he was still caring for her. In reality, every dollar he sent was passing through the hands of someone who enjoyed turning help into power. Clara's daily life became a quiet punishment. She woke before sunrise, swept the compound, cleaned the sitting room, boiled water, helped prepare food, washed clothes, attended school, returned tired, cooked again, and studied late into the night. If she looked exhausted, nobody praised her endurance. If she did well in school, nobody celebrated her growth. One afternoon, she returned home with joyful news that she had passed an important exam with very good results. For one brief moment, she forgot herself and smiled like the old Clara. Victor looked proud, but Naomi barely raised her head. "Did you buy food with the result?" she asked. The smile died immediately. Clara went behind the water tank that evening and cried when no one could see her. That was where Nolan noticed her for the first time. He was one of the newer tenants in a building behind the compound. He was quiet, respectful, and not the type to force conversation. He did not come too close. He did not ask rude questions. He only said gently, "You do not have to hide to cry." Clara turned in shame, quickly wiping her face. He offered her a clean handkerchief and said he had only come to deliver something to Victor, but it looked like she needed it more. That small kindness stayed with her because nobody had spoken to her with softness in a very long time. Meanwhile, Adrian's calls began to change. Not all at once, but enough. The calls became shorter. The laughter came less naturally. The warmth was still there sometimes, but it no longer held her the way it used to. And whenever Clara tried to hint that things were not right in the house, Adrian would say, "Please be patient with Mama. She means well." Those words hurt Clara more than he knew. Means well. For who? The woman he thought was helping was slowly shrinking her dignity day by day, and he was too far away to see it. Then Adrian came home for a short visit. The whole house changed. Naomi cooked too much food, bought things, smiled too brightly, and moved around like she had swallowed joy whole. Even Clara's heart woke up in a dangerous way. Because no matter how much pain had built up inside her, seeing Adrian again stirred something she had been trying to bury. He looked better, stronger, more polished, more like a man shaped by another world. But even in his better clothes and foreign confidence, Clara still saw the boy she had once believed in before anybody else did. Their reunion was both sweet and painful. Adrian was kind in private, distracted in public, and still too blind to how much authority his mother held over Clara's daily life. At night, when they had moments alone, Clara wanted to pour everything out. The money, the insults, the control, the loneliness. The way she had been reduced inside the very house where she was supposed to be protected. But each time she looked at him, she swallowed part of the truth. And Adrian foolishly mistook her silence for peace. He would say things like, "Just give me a little more time. I am doing all this for us." Clara wanted to believe him. She truly did. But pain had already started asking questions love could not answer. After Adrian left again, the house felt colder than before. Naomi grew even bolder. One morning, after handing Clara a list of chores, Naomi said, "Do not forget who you are in this house." Something in Clara, already stretched too far, finally pushed back. Quietly, she asked, "Who am I in this house?" Naomi turned and stared at her. Clara repeated the question, voice trembling. A daughter, a guest, a servant, or a mistake you are trying to clean up? Naomi's face hardened. Victor looked up in alarm, but Naomi only stepped closer and said words Clara would never forget. You thought suffering with my son gave you ownership. It did not. When a man rises, he cannot carry every old thing with him. Old thing. That was what 13 years of sacrifice had become in Naomi's mouth. Not love, not loyalty, not history. An old thing. That same night, Clara heard Naomi and Victor speaking in the sitting room. Their voices were low, but not low enough. Victor sounded troubled. He reminded Naomi that Clara had given many years of her life to Adrian and had helped him when he had nothing. Naomi did not care. She said the world had changed. She said Adrian now needed a woman who fit his new level. She even revealed she had started making plans for him to meet another woman, a more polished woman, a woman from a better background. Clara stood there listening, her heart breaking with every word. That was the moment she fully understood that she was not being delayed. She was being replaced. Something broke inside her that night. Not loudly, not in a way anyone could see. But inside, something finally cracked. 13 years of waiting. 13 years of loyalty. 13 years of believing sacrifice meant something. And now she realized they were preparing to throw her away after using her youth, her help, and her love. The next morning, Naomi behaved as if nothing had happened. She gave instructions, asked for chores, moved around normally. That calm cruelty did something terrible to Clara's mind. It pushed her into a corner where fear and desperation began to speak at the same time. Then, just a few days later, Adrian called. His voice was warm for the first time in a long while. He told Clara he missed her. Those words should have comforted her, but instead they made her ache. Because how do you tell someone you miss them while leaving their dignity in the hands of the person destroying it? Clara nearly told him everything. She nearly poured out the truth. But fear stopped her. Fear that he would defend his mother again. Fear that he would doubt her. Fear that if she spoke and he still failed to stand up for her, then the last bit of hope she had left would die completely. So instead, with Naomi's voice still ringing in her head, with the threat of replacement choking her heart, and with 13 years of pain rising into one wild, desperate moment, Clara said the words that would drag every life involved into deeper trouble. Adrian, she whispered, gripping the phone so tightly that her fingers hurt. There is something I need to tell you. He waited. The house was silent. Clara's heartbeat thundered in her chest. And then, with fear leading where wisdom should have stood, she opened her mouth and said, I am pregnant. The line went completely silent. And in that silence, Clara knew that nothing from that moment forward would remain the same. Adrian did not speak for a long moment. Clara stood in the dark, gripping the phone so tightly her fingers hurt. Her mouth had gone dry. Her own words sounded strange in her head. I am pregnant. She had said them. She had thrown them into the air, and now she could not pull them back. Finally, Adrian spoke, and his voice was low with shock. Pregnant. Clara leaned against the wall because her legs suddenly felt too weak to hold her. Yes, she whispered. The lie had left her mouth small, but already it was becoming something bigger than her. Adrian breathed hard into the phone. Why didn't you tell me before now? Clara closed her eyes. Because it was not true. Because she was afraid. Because pain had cornered her and fear had chosen words before wisdom could stop them. But she could not say any of that. So she answered with the only safe thing she could find. I was scared. Adrian went quiet again. Then, to her surprise, his voice softened. Do not be scared. Tears rose sharply in Clara's eyes. Those were the words she had needed months earlier. Not now. Not after the lie. Listen to me, Adrian said. No matter what happens, that is my child. Nobody will disgrace you. Not even Mama. I will handle it. Clara cried silently after the call ended. Not because she felt peace, but because for the first time in a long while, Adrian sounded ready to stand up for her. The problem was that he was standing up for a lie. He had come too late, and she had answered his delay with desperation. By morning, Naomi already sensed that something had changed. Maybe guilt shows on the face. Maybe fear changes the way a person breathes. Or maybe cruel people are simply very good at noticing when someone under their control is breaking. Later that day, Adrian called his mother. Clara did not hear every word, but she heard enough. Naomi's voice rose sharply in the sitting room. Pregnant! Under my roof! Clara froze where she stood. Naomi paced with one hand on her waist, her anger rising with every second. And you are telling me now, after all this time, so because she has trapped herself into your life, you think I will clap for her? Victor looked up in confusion, but Naomi kept speaking into the phone. I warned you from the beginning. Girls like that know exactly when to throw a baby into a matter. Clara covered her mouth. The lie she had spoken in one moment of fear had suddenly become a living thing inside the house. When Naomi ended the call, she turned and found Clara standing there. The air changed immediately. Victor stood slowly, sensing trouble. Naomi walked toward Clara with dangerous calm. So, she said, her eyes cold. Clara could not answer. You have become very wise, Naomi continued. Victor frowned and asked what was going on, but Naomi ignored him. Tell him, she snapped at Clara. Clara's silence was enough. Victor's face changed. Naomi let out a bitter laugh. Wonderful. Just wonderful. Then, with the hard control of someone who had found a new weapon, she said, from today, school is over. No more moving up and down. You will stay here where I can see you. Clara stared at her in disbelief. But my exams. Naomi cut her off instantly. I said no. Then she took Clara's phone. She controlled her movements. She reduced her world to the walls of that house. What Adrian thought would protect Clara only made Naomi more powerful over her. For the next few days, Clara lived like a prisoner. Naomi told neighbors she was unwell. She answered calls on Clara's behalf. She watched everything. Even food started to feel like a favor instead of a need. Shame moved through the house like smoke. On the third day, Victor quietly opened Clara's door when Naomi had gone out. He entered with food and a face full of old regret. Eat, he said softly. Clara took the plate with shaking hands. Victor sat down and rubbed his forehead. He looked tired in a way that had nothing to do with age. After a long silence, he admitted the thing Clara had needed someone to say. He knew Naomi had been wrong from the beginning. He knew collecting Adrian's money had become a way to control her. He knew the house had not been kind to her. Clara burst into tears. Why did nobody help me? She asked. Victor had no answer strong enough to heal that wound because there was none. Silence in the face of cruelty is its own kind of cruelty. Before leaving, Victor told Clara something that tightened fear around her chest. Adrian was preparing to come home. He wanted to settle the matter himself. Clara felt cold all over. Adrian coming home should have been the answer to prayer, but now it felt like judgment coming down the road because there was no child, not yet, only a lie, growing heavier by the day. Victor looked at her with tired honesty and said, whatever happens, tell the truth. Clara lowered her head, but truth had already been delayed, and delayed truth often arrives carrying disaster. Around that same time, Nolan returned fully into the story. He had been away for work for a short period, and when he came back, he noticed immediately that Clara looked different, thinner, more frightened, more tired. He did not press her with questions. He simply saw what others were pretending not to see. One evening, when Naomi sent Clara outside to throw away trash, Nolan met her near the back gate. He kept a respectful distance and asked quietly, "Are you alright?" Clara gave the answer she had been giving everybody for too long. "I am fine." Nolan shook his head gently. "No, you are surviving. That is not the same thing." Clara told him to go before anyone saw them, but Nolan only handed her a small paper bag. Medicine, biscuits, nothing dramatic, just proof that somebody had noticed she looked faint. You can throw it away after I leave, he said. But at least, know somebody saw. He walked away before she could refuse again. Clara stood there holding that small bag like it was dangerous. And in a way, it was. Because kindness becomes dangerous when it reaches a heart that has been starving too long. The days dragged on. Adrian kept making plans to return. Naomi tightened her grip on the house. Clara sank deeper into the consequences of the lie, and Nolan appeared in quiet ways that slowly made a difference. A piece of fruit left where only she would find it. A gentle question asked with no pressure behind it. A look that held concern instead of judgment. He did not act like a savior. He did not force closeness. He simply treated Clara like a person. And that alone began to undo something inside her. Then one rainy afternoon, matters exploded. Clara had slipped out to handle an urgent school issue Naomi had forbidden. When she returned, wet from the rain and holding a damp folder, Naomi met her at the door. The slap landed so fast, Clara did not even see the hand move. Her head snapped sideways. Victor shouted in shock. Naomi trembled with fury. You disobeyed me? Clara held her cheek, tears filling her eyes. But this time something else rose inside her too. Not fear, not shame, anger. You are not my mother, Clara said. The whole house went silent. Naomi stared at her as if she could not believe what she had heard. Clara's heart pounded, but she did not stop. This is not care, this is cruelty. Naomi lunged toward her, but Victor stepped in and held her back. Clara, shaking with years of pain, said the words she had carried too long. Adrian sent money, but Naomi used it to control her. Adrian gave trust, but Naomi twisted it into humiliation, and then, after causing the damage, she still called Clara low class for surviving it. Naomi screamed that Clara was poisoning the house, but Clara answered with the truth. The poison has always been here. That night, Clara packed a small bag, not with pride, not with victory, with survival. She knew she could not stay much longer in a house where cruelty had become normal. But before she could leave, Adrian arrived. He came home at dawn without warning. He stepped into the compound dusty from travel, carrying a bag and urgency in his face. Naomi rushed toward him with joy that looked too polished to be real. Victor stared in relief. Clara froze in the passage. Adrian saw her and his whole expression changed. He noticed the thinness in her face, the fear in her eyes, the fading bruise near her cheek. What happened to your face? He asked immediately. Naomi answered too quickly. She fell. Adrian looked at Naomi, then at Clara. Clara lowered her eyes. Silence told him what words were still afraid to say. Adrian asked everybody to sit down. There was something different in his voice now, something harder, something done with excuses. Naomi tried to control the conversation, but Adrian stopped her. Then he turned to Clara and said, "Tell me the truth." Clara's heart hammered. This was the moment everything had been moving toward. Slowly, and then fully, she began to speak. She told him about the money, about begging for simple things, about delayed school needs, about insults, about being called low class, about hearing Naomi make plans to replace her, about the slap. Naomi tried twice to interrupt, but Adrian stopped her each time without taking his eyes off Clara. When Clara finished, the room felt heavy with silence. Adrian turned to Naomi and asked if it was true. Naomi tried to dismiss it as exaggeration, but then Adrian turned to Victor. Victor lowered his head. That was all the answer needed. Adrian stood up and looked at his mother with hurt, not trust. All this time I thought I was helping, he said. I thought sending money through you was wisdom. I thought I was protecting her. Then he looked at Clara with pain in his eyes. I was blind. For the first time in many months, Clara felt seen. That was all she had wanted. Not performance, not speeches, just sight. Adrian then did something Clara had once waited years for. He told her to leave the house with him that same day. He admitted he should have fought sooner. He said he could not change the past, but he was here now. He stretched out a hand and asked her to come. Clara stared at him with tears in her eyes. The moment she had once prayed for had finally arrived. But it had arrived too late. Her lips trembled. I can't, she whispered. Adrian frowned in confusion. What do you mean you can't? Then he remembered the pregnancy and said, Is it because of the baby? We will handle that. Clara broke. She covered her mouth and started crying with the full weight of everything she had hidden. The lie, the fear, the loneliness, the desperation, the late arrival of the help she had once begged life for. Through sobs, she finally said it. There is no baby. The room stopped. Naomi blinked in shock. Victor stiffened. Adrian did not move at all. Clara kept crying. I lied, she confessed. I was scared. I had heard what she said. I heard she wanted to replace me. I was afraid if I told you the truth, nothing would change. I wanted something that would force you to see me. I wanted something that would stop them from throwing me away. Adrian stepped back as if the words themselves had hit him. His face emptied in pain. You lied to me about a child? Clara nodded, unable to hide her shame. Naomi quickly found her voice and tried to use the moment against her, but Adrian shut her down with one word. Then the room fell into another long silence. Adrian walked to the window and stood there with his back to everyone. When he finally spoke, his voice sounded raw. He had come home thinking he was going to defend the mother of his child. He had come home ready to do the right thing. Now he was standing in the middle of a truth so broken it had no clean edges. Then came the final turn none of them were ready for. There was a knock at the door. Victor opened it. Nolan stood there holding an envelope from Clara's school. The moment he saw the room, he sensed tension. He apologized and said he had only come to deliver the letter. Naomi's eyes sharpened at once. So now men are coming to the house for her? She said with poisonous satisfaction. Nolan stiffened. Adrian turned slowly toward Clara. Clara felt panic flood her body. Nolan looked at Clara, then at Adrian, and in 1 second understood enough to know that hidden things were already tearing the room apart. Naomi, who never knew when to stop, pushed harder. She asked whether this was the man whose child Clara was carrying now. Nolan stopped moving. Adrian went still. Clara felt the room spin. Nolan looked at Clara with confusion and concern. You didn't tell him? He asked quietly. That sentence opened the last locked door. Adrian's face changed completely. He turned to Clara and asked the question she could no longer escape. Clara cried harder than before. She told the rest of the truth. After the lie, after the hurt, after the house had already broken her down, Nolan's kindness had reached her in the middle of her loneliness. She had been wounded, angry, and empty. He had been present, and presence can become powerful when someone else has been absent for too long. Adrian stared at her as if he no longer knew who she was. Clara admitted the truth fully. She was now actually pregnant, and the child was not Adrian's, it was Nolan's. The room fell into a silence so deep it felt almost holy. Naomi sank into a chair in false shock. Victor lowered his head. Nolan did not rush to claim anything proudly. He simply stood there like a man ready to be responsible for what was his. Adrian looked destroyed. Not only because Clara had turned to another man, but because he understood that he had helped create the emptiness where another man entered. Money is not presence. Provision is not protection. Distance is not love when dignity is dying. After a long silence, Adrian asked Nolan one final question. Will you stand by her? Nolan answered without drama, yes. He admitted he was not innocent, but he also said he would not run from what was now his responsibility. Adrian then turned to Clara. I loved you, he said. Clara cried and answered, I know. Then Adrian said something that hurt because it was true. I failed you, and you failed me too. Clara bowed her head. Truth does not flatter anybody. It simply stands there and forces everyone to face themselves. Adrian faced his mother next. He told Naomi plainly that she had used his trust as a weapon. She had not protected him. She had used control, pride, and class shame to destroy the very relationship she once praised when he was poor. Naomi cried, but not all tears come from innocence. Some come from exposure. Adrian turned to his father too and told him that silence had also failed. Victor accepted it because it was true. Then Adrian picked up his bag. He said he needed to leave the house for now. He could not stay where so much trust had been buried. Naomi called after him, but he kept walking. Clara did not feel victory as she watched him go. This was not that kind of ending. It was justice, but justice arrived carrying loss in both hands. Nolan remained quietly near the door, not forcing himself into the moment. Victor, broken by regret, asked Clara for forgiveness. Clara told him she might forgive one day, but she would not forget. Then she turned to Naomi. Naomi could not meet her eyes. Clara's voice was quiet but steady when she spoke. You kept calling me low class, but class is not in clothes. It is in character. And today, everybody has seen yours. Clara left that house with a small bag and a changed heart. The place where she had given 13 years of her life no longer looked like a home. It looked like a cage. Nolan walked beside her, not like a hero, but like a man choosing responsibility. In time, Clara would give birth to a baby boy. Nolan would be there, not perfect, not magical, but present. Adrian would go on with a scar he never expected, carrying the hard lesson that love cannot be outsourced and money cannot replace dignity. Naomi would live with regret because the same girl she once called low class turned out to be the one person who had loved her son faithfully when he had nothing. Clara did not leave the story proud of every choice she made. She had lied, she had fallen, she had hurt and been hurt, but she had also survived a house that tried to erase her. And sometimes survival is where healing begins. The truth came late, but it still came. And when truth finally stood in that house, everyone had to answer to it. Have you ever loved someone so deeply, only to realize the people around them were quietly destroying your place in their life? Life lesson. Never place the person you love under the control of someone who enjoys their pain, because what you fail to protect today may become what you lose tomorrow. Subscribe to this channel to support our growth.